Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps out my channel a great deal. And I'd love it if you'd leave a comment as well. I think today, a while back I made a ring with a really pretty opal that I bought some time ago. And I was never really pleased with the ring itself as far as the final outcome of it. And so I decided to cut it open and pull that opal out. It's about an 11 millimeter Ethiopian opal. It's very pretty, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I'm going to try and make kind of a filigree pendant with that as the central point of it. And I think it'll make for a pretty piece, much better than the ring that I did earlier, so we'll see how that comes out. Before we get started, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are a great group of people, and they've created this really nice community over there, and I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the financial support that they provide for me. The other group are my YouTube subscribers. I think we just passed 11,300, which is a pretty amazing number of subscribers as far as I'm concerned, so thanks for that. If you haven't subscribed, why haven't you subscribed? I'd love to have you as a subscriber. But thank you for all the nice comments. The little financial contributions like the buy me a coffee and the super thanks, those things really help with supplies, especially as the prices have gone up lately. So thanks for that. All right, let's get started on this pretty opal pendant. This is one of my design idea books, which you can get on my merch store. I find it's extra useful in recent years to sketch things up in advance. I'm filling this one up pretty fast, so oops, too far. Future projects. I like it because it has this dot matrix in the background, which helps me to keep things sort of symmetrical, because I'm not terribly good at freehanding. So this is what I was thinking. Let me show you the opal. It's super pretty. I pulled it out of the ring because I just was never happy with the ring, but it's an Ethiopian opal. It's got quite a bit of fire in it. I'm not sure if you can see it through the camera here, but like I said, it's about 11 millimeters. I'm going to bezel set it, and it's going to be the central point for this right here. And I didn't draw out all of the filigree that I'm going to put in here, but I did do a little bit in advance to see how it would look. Get it here. And I didn't follow exactly what I drew, but I'm pretty close. So that'll be one side, and I'll probably do the same thing on this side. And then I'll fill in this. I may not follow this pattern here. That's what I sketched up, but I may change it around a little bit to make it look good. So we'll see how that turns out. I think that'll be pretty. I'm also thinking I'm going to dome it a little bit so that it kind of stands away from the chest of the wearer, towards the viewer, I should say. And for the outer border here, I think I'm going to use 16 or 14 gauge squareware. I'm not sure which. And I have some, I may make a bezel from scratch, or a bail from scratch, but I'm not sure. I have some bails from previous videos about bails that I haven't used for anything, so I might use one of these if I feel like I can't get this to sit right now. But I got this little filigree-ish bail here that I made as an example. I have this one too, which is kind of more of a marquee shaped filigree-ish. Here's this one, which is kind of a variation of what I call a sandwich bail. Maybe I have this one here, which we could use, which is one you could actually clip onto different things because it's open-ended. But tell me which one you think I should have used in the comments, if you'd like. But I think our first step here is we're going to make a bezel for this. I'm going to do it open-backed, and I think I found a piece of that 16 gauge square over here. I might use as a platform to make it a step for the stone to sit on. And I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip in 28 gauge. It's also, if you want to use metric system, it's 4.76 millimeters tall. And I think that's tall enough for this. Should double check that. Yeah, that should be alright. Just about right. It's a pretty deep stone, so I want to use pretty tall bezel here. Alright, let's make a bezel for this, and then we'll move on to some detailed filigree work. One thing you will notice on this This is the first time I've ever done this for filigree stuff, but I balled up the ends on the wires I was using, so it has kind of a more of a final termination on each one. I think that looks pretty cool, so I think I'll do that as I go. This may take quite a bit of work to fill in all of this, and so I may not film all of it. I may film stages of it, so you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over again, but I do want you to get the idea of what I'm doing without having to watch me for 3 hours while I'm doing this. So it's probably going to take a little while, but we'll start with the bezel, so let's do that first. If you've never been to my channel before, I use primarily hard silver sheet solder, which looks like this, and I spray on flux or I dribble it on with a little bottle, so it depends on the situation. I'm liking more and more dribbling. Opals are relatively soft, so you have to be a little careful when you're setting them, so you don't scratch them. For this one, I used a jeweler's saw to take the original setting apart, which, like I said, I never was a big fan of. I just didn't execute it as well as I would have liked. So I liked the idea. I didn't pull it off very well. I've marked just a little bit past where the ends meet. Cut myself a little bit of solder here. I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch pieces to solder the bezel closed, but for the smaller filigree work we're going to be using some smaller pieces than that. This will probably be somewhere between an intermediate and an advanced project because of the delicate soldering that might be a little challenging for a beginner. Not this part here, but when we do the filigree part. I think we hit it on the nose with the size for that one. Now I'm going to make a little step bezel, and I'm going to use this 16 gauge square wire for the stone to sit on. So we need to cut a piece and shape it so it fits right inside of this bezel. Overlap it like this, where I have the top going over the bottom. You can adjust it down or up as you need until you can get it to fit in there. When it's close, I'm going to cut it off a little bit short because it's not quite there yet. He's still a bit too big. I always cut it a little big so you can gradually snip pieces out until it fits. It's much easier to do that than it is to keep having to cut a new piece because you cut it too small. Or having to fill in the little gap between the two ends when you put it in there in some way. Now we're talking. I'm going to solder this closed so I can round it out more nicely. Normally I would just put it in there and solder it in at one shot, but since I may need to clean this one up a little bit. So I have a bit of solder here on the pad left over from earlier. Flux this. I do a lot of pick soldering in my videos, and that's where I pick up a piece on the end of a pick, touch it to the metal once I have it hot enough. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up there about how to do this. It's a pretty useful skill if you want to upgrade your soldering skills a little bit. Hit it pretty close to on the nose on that one. Seems like maybe it's going to be a good bezel day. It's just different ways you can mess them up. So don't get too frustrated until you've done 30 or 40 of them though, because then it becomes pretty easy. So easiest way to solder one of these in is to just make a little circle out of pieces of solder. Flux this, set it right on top of the little bits of solder, and heat it from the outside, and it just draws it up in there. So let's do that. So I'm just going to file that bottom flap. Alright, that's pretty good. So, what I did to make that this little bit earlier, should be going kind of like to that side. Then I'll do one opposite that's the same, and then we'll start filling in the gaps. So I think I cut these, and these ended up being about pretty close to 2 centimeters, so a little less than an inch. Maybe 3/4 of an inch or so. And I'm going to cut a bunch of these, and then we're going to ball up the ends on them. So here's one that the end is balled up on. You can see it's got a little melted ball on there. So we're going to do that to all of them. There's mostly these should be long enough for pretty much most of those decorations we're doing. However, if we need to, we can custom make some longer ones. Depends on how we decide to go with the rest of the pattern. Let's keep one of them as a template in case I need to cut some more. That's a good rule of thumb. If you're ever making a whole bunch of one thing, make sure you cut at least one extra. Okay, so I'm going to ball up the ends on a couple of these, and I'm not going to make you watch me do it on all of them, but we'll do a couple here. So I usually just grab it with my tweezers like this, heat the whole thing a little bit, and then focus on the bottom to get it to just start to melt just a tiny bit. This guy just a little bump on there now. So I'm going to do the rest of these and then I'll be back. Okay, I've all those pretty much balled up. Now, I think to start with, I'm going to duplicate this one. And the way I did that is I started with these two loops down here and made those. And to get little tiny curves on these, I usually use a combination of my round nose pliers and my needle nose pliers, or chain nose, whichever you prefer. So I wanted to match that one, so this needs to curve in a little bit more that way. That's pretty good. Now let's make another one. Basically going to be like that. Yeah, that'll be our first starting point probably. I want to look at the, I have these kind of pretty far curved down like that. So I think about like that. If I can do that without moving it too much. And for these, we're going to use little tiny pieces of solder. So let's cut some little baby ones. Like this, I can get it pretty consistent, so I'll cut this off. So the next thing I'm going to do is this little kind of heart shape right here, so I need to curve two more of those. Try and figure out about how long I need to cut this off. I'm also going to file these ends to kind of a sharper point so that they merge into that other shape. It's going to go kind of like that. This is one of those pieces where it's going to require a lot of hunching over, so my back is probably going to pay for it later. Okay, so next step, I think, let's add these ones here. Yeah, so I need to make two more of those and cut them short and make them so they kind of like taper into that by filing probably. I want them to kind of merge in right about there. Maybe a little bit further down than that. make a mark right here about where I'm going to cut it, and then we'll kind of file it so it flows in. Doing some little fine detail work here. Sometimes it's hard for me to see anymore. But I think that's about right. I think this one's still just a tiny bit too long. I'm not actually going to solder these two up here to that part because I'm going to be sticking another one in there up here that goes like that. So we'll leave a little space there, and we'll just solder it here and here for now. You'll probably see why pick soldering is handy for something like this, because you can deliver a piece of solder pretty easily where you want it to go. Let's see how close we are on height, since we're going to put a border around it. So I need to cut the one that's still a little pinkish here just a bit shorter. So let's do that. I think that's our first start there. So I think I'm going to solder those onto there and make sure I can get this close to straight across from each other. I bumped it a little bit, so I had to reposition things. Okay, I need to do some sketching and figuring how I'm going to fill the rest of that space in, so I'll be back in a minute. So off camera, I went ahead and I made a frame out of 14 gauge. It was mostly by trial and error, getting the size to fit right around there. And the only other thing I did was kind of figured out pattern I was going to fill in this top part and the bottom part down here with. And the reason I did the frame next was because I was a little bit outside of my original border, so this is slightly bigger than I was anticipating. And so I started piecing together this part here, and then I decided to make the frame. So now I'm going to start adding pieces in here. I don't know if I said, but the reason I added the border, it'll be easier to fill in these spaces and get everything touching where I want it to touch by slightly changing sizes and stuff. So this one like that. So that'll be this part right here, this part right here. So I think I'm going to file these down a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and solder these in between here, and then we'll put all these together, and then we'll just keep building on it. I think what I'll probably do is I'll do the top, fill in the top here, and then I'll do the rest of it off camera so you don't have to watch me do the same thing, just like before. Kind of like it about that level. What do we have going on up here then? Okay. We may only need one of these loops up here up top on either side in order to kind of fill that in. So I'm going to snip these off just a skosh, kind of file them to a point. I'm sort of liking this as it's coming along. I think that actually looks pretty good like that. So maybe I'll solder these two together first, and then we can cut it off so it fits in there perfectly. Fits in there nicely. It's relatively symmetrical, so let's do it. Okay, so we're starting to look fuller. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did up here down here, but you probably don't need to watch me, so I'll do that off camera, then we'll come back and put a bail on it. Alright, so I got it finished as far as filling it in. This I couldn't quite get exactly the same as up here, so it's a little bit different, but with the busyness of the pattern I don't think anybody will probably notice too much. I also domed it just slightly by setting it over my dapping block and lightly tapping it till it was domed a bit. I'm going to add a ring on here. Which is right here. Made out of 18 gauge. Get that soldered on. And then I think I'm going to use the filigree bail like I was talking about. And we'll see how that looks. So open this up a little bit. Pop it over this ring. Oops. The good thing about this stage is one of the few times where you don't have to heat the entire piece, because I don't really want any of that solder flowing. I just want the bail hot enough to flow that. And so I'm just going to pick it a little bit there. You could use a like easy solder or something if you wanted to, I suppose. And then I'll pickle that and we'll get it all polished and I'll set the stone for you at the end. Once again, I failed to hit the start button on my side camera, and so I'm going to show you what I just did. This is the finished product as far as polished up and everything, and I set stones a little differently than other people do. Use a flat side here of my chain nose pliers to push it up against the stone. Work my way around once or twice, and then start kind of curving it over with some force. You got to be a little cautious with opals like this because it's a little bit soft. And then the last stage, a lot of people will use a burnishing tool. I use the outside smooth part of the chain nose. And I'm just going to rub that top edge with a little bit of force to smooth it out and to shine it up. Get rid of any kind of irregularities. And then you're pretty much done. You can see that's kind of what I was shooting for. So I'm pleased. I think it turned out nice. So I'll take some better pictures and put them at the end. That was the Filigree Opal pendant. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And take a moment to watch a few other videos. I have over 310, I think. I haven't counted them lately, but it's quite a collection of videos up there and lots of content for all different levels of skill. So I think you'll find something valuable there. If you haven't done so already, you should subscribe to my channel. I put out 3 videos per week. And there's just a lot of good content here, so check it out, subscribe, and then before you leave, make sure to hit the video description down below. Some important links in there. I am now an affiliate of Pepe Tools, so if you saw some cool tools you like, you might want to visit that link. If you follow that link, it benefits me and Pepe Tools, so make sure to do that. There's a link to safety in there. That's important. You should always consider your safety when you're doing stuff like this. Check out the other links too. There's different ways to support the channel. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that community and maybe become a part of it. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea books to sketch up your designs, or some other merch like a funny coffee mug. There's a link to my website if you'd like to see some jewelry I've made. There's a link to buy me a coffee if you want to give me a little influx of cash to help with supplies, so I appreciate that in advance. All right, well, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Happy silversmithing.